Mara Eden stood on the observation deck of the horizon, her fingers tracing the cool edge of the viewport as the stars blurred into streaks beyond the ship's shielding. The vessel hummed faintly, a relic of human ingenuity pieced together from scavenged parts and sheer will, orbiting the neutral relay station like a ghost in the void. She had been waiting for this, some sign, any fracture in the Council's unyielding facade. But not like this. The comms panel chimed, sharp and insistent, pulling her from the void's quiet pull. She activated it with a swipe, her reflection flickering across the screen. Sharp jaw, eyes shadowed from too many nights, plotting contingencies. The message was encrypted, stamped with the Council's seal, a stylized helix of interlocking worlds, cold and authoritative. Captain Eden, the automated voice intoned, devoid of inflection. This is the final expiration notice from the Interstellar Council. Humanity's conditional pardon, granted under Article 47 of the Atonement Accords, is hereby cancelled effective immediately. You are allotted 72 standard hours to vacate all claimed orbital spaces and prepare for supervised relocation. Non-compliance will result in enforcement protocols. The era of provisional autonomy ends. The words hung in the air, heavier than the artificial gravity. Mara felt the familiar coil in her gut tighten. Not panic, but the cold calculus of survival. 72 hours. Enough time to pack a civilization's dreams into crates, but not to fight. Or so they thought. She killed the feed and strode to the bridge, her boots echoing against the deck plates. The horizon wasn't a warship, but it carried the weight of one. Sensor arrays tuned for evasion, a skeleton crew of loyalists who'd seen the wars up close. Assemble the core team, she ordered the AI interface. Conference room now, priority 1. Minutes later, the small delegation gathered around the scarred table, salvaged from an old colony hauler, its surface etched with maps of lost outposts. Dr. Elias Wren arrived first, his lab coat rumpled, data slate clutched like a shield. He was the intellectual heart of this mission, a man who'd spent years compiling proofs of humanity's worth, his faith in facts as unyielding as his quiet grief over the sister he'd lost to the same conflicts that birthed the pardon. Sarah Coe slipped in last, her tactical vest still dusted from a recent drill, eyes sharp and restless. Mara's protégé, forged in the enforcer ranks before redemption, called her to something more. Sarah's impulsiveness had saved them more than once, even if it chafed against protocol. Mara didn't waste breath on preamble. She projected the notice onto the hollow screen, the Council's seal pulsing like a wound. They've pulled the plug. 72 hours and we're back to wards. Supervised habitats, no self-governance, our settlements stripped and redistributed. Exile in all but name. Ilias leaned forward, his face paling under the blue glow. This can't be legal. The extension request was filed weeks ago. We met every metric, resource contributions, conflict de-escalation data. I have the reports right here. He tapped his slate, pulling up streams of figures, aid shipments to fringe worlds, medical tech shared without strings, humanity's quiet rebuild after the wars. But his voice cracked on the last, a flicker of that vulnerability he buried under evidence. Kira's face haunted him still, her death in a council raid a leverage point they all knew could be revived. Sarah's fist clenched on the table, knuckles whitening. Legal? They're the law, but we're not rolling over. What's the play, Captain? We petition? Mara met their gazes, her own resolve a steady flame. Duty had carved her into this, rigid, unyielding, always favoring the bold stroke over endless talk. She'd led appeals before, watched diplomats fold under the Council's gaze, but humanity's agency wasn't negotiable, not while she breathed. Petition, yes, but not from afar. We demand an emergency hearing, Face them directly, force their hand before the clock runs dry. Ilias nodded slowly, though doubt shadowed his eyes. Institutions like the Council thrived on procedure. Bypassing it risked everything. I'll lead the presentation. I've compiled new evidence. Our aid programs in the Outer Rims. Neutral zones where we've stabilized ecosystems without demanding territory. It's not just numbers. It's proof we can contribute without the old aggressions. He hesitated, glancing at the notice's fine print. But emotional testimony is banned under the Accords. They call it manipulative. If I frame it as data. You volunteer? Mara asked, searching his face. Ilias's motive was pure, redemption through reason, but his flaw shone through. That naive trust, the belief that truth alone could sway the indifferent. He cared for his work, for Kira's memory woven into every metric, but pushing banned angles could shatter his reputation. Leave him and humanity branded as deceivers. I have to, he said, voice firming. If we don't show our complexity, they reduce us to monsters again. The aid isn't charity, it's survival strategy. We help others because isolation killed us before. Sarah shifted, her protective instincts flaring. She'd die before letting Ilias walk into that alone, her surrogate family too precious to lose. Evidence is good, Doc, but they ignore what suits them. We need leverage, something they can't spin. Her mind raced to the sealed archives below decks, relics from the Pardon era locked under human-only codes. The original forgiveness ledger page, the one Corvash signed personally, outlining our conditional terms. It's banned from public view, but if we produce it... Mara's pulse quickened. The ledger was the Council's sacred text, a ritualistic ledger of atonements enforced through public ceremonies. Retrieving it meant cracking seals meant for eternity, risking charges of desecration. But Sarah was right. It was tangible proof of their bargain, a crack in the Arbiter's impartial mask. You retrieve it, Mara said, locking eyes with her. Quietly, no traces. Sarah's grin was feral, a flash of the enforcer she'd been, impulsive edges honed by necessity. On it, give me 20. She was gone before protests could form, slipping toward the lower levels where the archives hummed in cryogenic lockdown. The room fell quiet, the weight of decisions settling like dust. Ilias fiddled with his slate, compiling files with mechanical precision, but Mara saw the tremor in his hands, fear of leverage, of his family's ghosts being dragged into the light. She placed a hand on his shoulder, brief and steady. We do this together. No one's a symbol today. He met her gaze, nodding. For Kira, for all of them. Sarah returned faster than promised, a slim case in hand, her face flushed from the exertion of bypassing security fields. The air in the conference room thickened as she unsealed it, revealing the artifact, a translucent page of crystalline alloy, etched with holographic script that shimmered like captured starlight. The original forgiveness ledger entry for humanity, Corvash's austere signature at the bottom, binding the conditional pardon to observable reforms. Banned not for fragility, but because it humanized the Council's judgments, showed the precedents they feared setting. It's authentic, Sarah confirmed, voice low, pulled from the vault without tripping alarms. But if they scan it, they'll know we accessed restricted history. Mara lifted the page carefully, feeling its faint warmth, a pulse of encoded data that whispered of wars past, the human expansions that scarred galaxies, the apologies extracted in blood and treaties. It was leverage, yes, but laced with risk. Expose it, and they admitted clinging to a flawed mercy. Her flaw gnawed at her. That rigid drive for decisive action, blind to subtler paths. Negotiation had failed her people before. Gambits were all she trusted, But this could cost Sarah her freedom, brand her a thief in the eyes of the stars. We use it, Mara decided, voice cutting the tension. Not as a weapon, but a reminder. They can't revoke what they inscribed. She turned to the comms station, bypassing the standard diplomatic channels with a override code. Human ingenuity at its most polite defiance. No intermediaries, no buffered transmissions. Direct to the pinnacle. The line connected after a tense silence, the screen resolving into the austere chamber of the Council's apex. High Arbiter Corvash appeared, his form a silhouette of elongated limbs and iridescent scales, eyes like polished obsidian reflecting the ritual flames behind him. He was the embodiment of the Council's philosophy, atonement as institution, forgiveness a ledger entry to be audited and erased. Performative impartiality masked his fear of precedent, of authority fracturing under human unpredictability. Captain Eden, Corvash intoned, voice a resonant hum that vibrated through the speakers. This channel is reserved for emergencies, Mara interrupted, calm as void, but laced with the danger of a drawn blade. Which this is, Arbiter. The final notice arrived. 72 hours to dismantle our autonomy. We request, no demand, a face-to-face session, now, aboard neutral ground, or here on the horizon if you prefer. Bring your full authority. We'll bring ours. Corvash's eyes narrowed, the flames flickering in their depths. He leaned forward, scales catching the light like fractured armor. Protocol dictates a formal appeal through envoys. Your impatience does not serve atonement. Impatience? Mara's tone stayed even, polite thunder. We've complied for cycles, aid, restraint, proof of our moral complexity. You revoke on a whim? Face us, Arbiter, or admit the ledger's ink runs when inconvenient. A pause stretched, the connection humming with unspoken calculations. Corvash's philosophy demanded control, but humans had always been the wild card, competent, scarred, capable of polite savagery when cornered. He feared the contagion, one species reclaiming agency, others following. Very well, he conceded at last, voice edged with frost. Neutral relay station, Chamber of Reckoning, 1 hour. Delegation limited to 3. No artifacts beyond testimony. The line severed, leaving the room in charged silence. Mara set the ledger page down, its glow fading. 1 hour, not the 72, but a razor-thin window bought with audacity. Sarah holstered her sidearm instinctively, eyes alight with the thrill of the edge. Ilias exhaled, slate clutched tighter, his naivety tested but unbroken. They moved as one. The horizon's engines warming for the short burn to the station. Mara felt the war-scarred weight of it all, the civilians waiting on fragile worlds, the ethics they'd clawed back from oblivion. This wasn't victory. It was the first cut in a deeper fight. But humanity didn't yield politely forever. When pushed, they pushed back, with clarity, with cost, with the quiet terror of those who'd learned survival's brutal math. The relay station loomed ahead, a colossal ring of alien alloys orbiting the system's heart, its docking bays yawning like indifferent mouths. Docking clamps engaged with a shudder, and the delegation disembarked into the sterile corridors, the air thick with recycled ozone and the faint tang of alien incense from ongoing rituals. Sarah scanned the shadows, her hand hovering near her concealed scanner. Protocol be damned. Security was her creed. Ilias walked beside her, murmuring adjustments to his presentation, his emotional anchors fraying under the band's shadow. But Mara led, steps measured, the ledger's case a subtle weight in her satchel. The Chamber of Reckoning awaited, its doors parting with a hydraulic sigh. Corvash stood at the dais, flanked by silent aides, ethereal forms from a dozen species, their eyes recording every nuance for the eternal archives. The room was a vault of judgment, walls etched with past atonements, holographic ledgers floating like specters. "Captain," Corvash greeted, his gaze sweeping the trio, "you bypass protocol. Explain this urgency or the session ends." Mara stepped forward, unflinching. "Urgency is the expiration itself. We've earned more than eviction." She nodded to Ilias, who activated his slate, projecting streams of data, vids of human medics in storm-ravaged colonies, resource logs of shared tech that saved neutral fleets. No tears, no pleas, just evidence, raw and unyielding. Ilias's voice steadied as he spoke. These programs, Mara's boots echoed against the polished obsidian floor of the emergency chamber, a vast dome that hummed with the low thrum of holographic emitters. She kept her delegation tight behind her, Sarah at her right flank, eyes scanning the shadowed alcoves like a predator, scenting traps, and Ilias a step back, clutching his data slate with knuckles white as bone. The air tasted metallic, laced with the faint ozone of alien tech, and Mara forced her shoulders to stay square. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a trial, and Corvash presided like a judge who'd already penned the verdict. The chamber's central dais rose like a frozen wave, ringed by tiered seats where council envoys from a dozen worlds perched in rigid silence. At the apex stood High Arbiter Corvash, his elongated frame draped in robes of iridescent silver, the forgiveness ledger projected beside him, a swirling vortex of accusations etched in glowing script, his multifaceted eyes like shattered prisms fixed on Mara as she halted at the demarcation line, a faint shimmer of force field that separated petitioners from power. "Captain Eden," Corvash intoned, his voice a resonant chime that vibrated through the floor. "Your species' probation teeters on the edge of expiration. The ledger does not lie." He gestured, and the hologram bloomed with images. Shattered colony ships tumbling through void. Human enforcers in scarred armor dragging chained xeno-prisoners. The smoldering husks of worlds humanity had claimed in its desperate expansion. Resource wars that devoured 3 systems. Biological experiments that birthed plagues. The betrayal at Epsilon Vale, where your fleets turned on allied convoys for a scrap of habitable rock. Mara felt the weight of those ghosts pressing in, but she met his gaze without flinching. Her crew had fought those wars, bled in them, and she'd buried friends under the same stars. "Arbiter, those acts were born of survival, not malice. We've paid in blood and isolation." "Payment is insufficient," Corvash cut in, his tone as unyielding as the chamber's walls. "The council granted conditional pardon to foster atonement, not excuses. Humanity must demonstrate remorse through action, not words. I demand a public punitive act, one of your own, selected by the ledger's metrics, to undergo ritual divestiture, stripped of rank, kin, and autonomy before the galactic feed. Let your worlds witness the cost of defiance." Sarah shifted beside Mara, her hand twitching toward the concealed pulse holster at her belt. Mara's glance pinned her in place. "No moves here." "Not yet." The envoys murmured, their forms a blur of scales and tendrils, but Corvash silenced them with a raised talon. "Refusal activates the expiration bell. Your autonomy dissolves at once." Ilias stepped forward then, his face pale but set, data slate humming to life in his grip. Mara nodded once. "Your turn. Prove it with facts, not fury." He cleared his throat, the sound swallowed by the dome's acoustics, and his voice steadied as he spoke. "These programs are neural interfaces for disaster response, the gene therapies that stabilized irradiated zones on Vega Prime. They've saved millions, Arbiter, not just human lives. Look at the cross-species aid logs. We shared the tech with the Krell Collective after their solar flare crisis. 80% recovery rate, where your council's projections gave them 20. The hologram flickered as Ilias synced his slate, projecting schematics of sleek medical drones weaving through debris fields, vital signs spiking back to green on alien physiologies. Charts scrolled, humanitarian convoys delivering hydroponic seeds to famine-struck moons, algorithms predicting asteroid paths that shielded neutral trade lanes. Evidence of redemption isn't abstract. It's here, in the lives we've rebuilt, the alliances we've forged without conquest. Quarantine us if you must, but this data shows we're not the monsters your ledger paints. Corvash's eyes narrowed, facets glinting like warning lights. He waved a hand, and the projections shattered into static. Data is malleable, Dr. Wren. Your species twists truth as easily as code. This aid reeks of self-preservation, buying favor to evade judgment. He paused, consulting a private feed that whispered in his earpiece. For such presumption, the Council orders immediate quarantine of your homeworld, New Terra. All inbound vessels halted, essential personnel detained. Mara's gut twisted. New Terra, Ilias's birthplace, where his sister Kira still coordinated relief efforts from the orbital labs. She saw the color drain from Ilias's face, his slate nearly slipping from numb fingers. Arbiter, that's leverage, not justice, she said, voice low and edged. Kira Wren is a civilian scientist, not part of this delegation. Justice is institutional, Corvash replied, unmoved. Her work on those very therapies you tout? Now suspect. The quarantine ensures compliance. Dawn approaches. Choose your punitive act wisely. The session dissolved into a haze of procedural adjournments, envoys filing out like shadows retreating from light. Mara led her team to the antechamber, a sterile corridor lined with surveillance nodes that pulsed faintly. Sarah's jaw was clenched, her impulsive energy coiling like a spring, while Ilias stared at the floor, breaths shallow. They'll use her against me, he muttered. Kira, she doesn't deserve this. We'll get her out, Mara said, gripping his shoulder. Focus. We adapt. But doubt gnawed at her. Rigid duty had gotten them this far, but Corvash's moves were surgical, carving at their seams. A soft chime echoed from the corridor's end, and Diplomat Jaro emerged from a side alcove, his avian features sharp under a hooded cloak. He was a mid-tier envoy from the neutral Thalix block, all beak and calculating eyes, known for brokering side deals in the Council's underbelly. Captain, he hissed, voice pitched low, a word, privately. Mara waved Sarah and Ilias back, following Jaro into a dim service nook where the air recyclers hummed louder, masking words. Make it quick, we're not in the mood for games. Jaro's feathers ruffled, a nervous tick. No games. The Arbiter's quarantine is a faint pressure to break you, but I can offer limited immunity for your delegation. Safe passage for Eden and Wren. Concessions on the pardon terms. He leaned in, eyes darting. In exchange, the Enforcer, Sarah Coe, her record from the Enforcer days. It's gold for the ledger. Hand her over quietly, and the Council's wrath cools. Mara's blood ran cold, the offer slithering like poison. Sarah, her protégé, the one who'd pulled her from wreckage on a dozen ops, impulsive but loyal to the core. Trade her like a bargaining chip? You're asking me to sell out my own for a scrap of mercy. That's not immunity, that's betrayal. Jaro shrugged, claws clicking. Survival's a harsh ledger, Captain. Think on it. My channel's open till midnight. He vanished into the corridor's gloom, leaving Mara with the echo of his words. She rejoined the others, but the fracture was already spiderwebbing. Sarah's eyes sharp on her, Ilias withdrawn into his fear for Kira. They retreated to their secured quarters, a Spartan module on the station's rim, where the viewport framed the cold sprawl of stars. No sooner had the door sealed Then Sarah's comm buzzed. An anonymous leak, text scrolling in stark code. Yarrow's offer for immunity. Arbiter's eyes everywhere. Sarah's face hardened, betrayal flashing raw. They think I'm the weak link? After everything? Ilias looked up from his slate where quarantine alerts blared. It's a divide-and-conquer play. Corvash wants us turning on each other. Mara's mind raced, duty clashing with the fierce protectiveness that had forged Sarah into more than a soldier, a sister in arms. Handing her over would fracture the delegation, doom their appeal. But refusal meant escalation, Kira trapped, humanity's pardon slipping away. No one's trading anyone, she said. Voice steady despite the storm inside. We counter with something they can't ignore. A public confession, not scripted remorse, but raw truth. Broadcast it galaxy-wide. Our wars, our mistakes, our reasons. Let them see we're not hiding. Sarah's eyes narrowed, impulsive fire banking into resolve. Risky, exposes our flanks. Everything's a risk, Mara replied. But it proves agency, humanity owning its scars, not letting you become theirs. Ilias nodded slowly, vulnerability cracking his naivety. If it saves Kira, I'll testify. The data backs the honesty. They drafted the proposal in hurried bursts, Mara's fingers flying over the console, weaving tactics with unvarnished admissions. The enforcer purges that Sarah had walked away from. The experiments Ilias had questioned too late. By the time they submitted it to the chamber's docket, tension coiled the air thick as smoke. Corvash's response came swift, a holographic summons pulling them back to the dais under the dome's unforgiving light. The Arbiter stood alone this time, envoys dismissed, his presence a monolith. Your proposal is noted, Captain. A broadcast confession, bold if theatrical. The Council might entertain it as partial proof of remorse. Mara held her breath, Sarah rigid at her side, Ilias's hope flickering fragile. But boldness requires reciprocity, Corvash continued, his voice slicing clean. One condition, a voluntary exile, a named human leader, your choice, but from the Ledger's roster of influencers, must depart Sol space by dawn. No appeals, no return. This act seals the confession's validity. Refuse and the expiration bell tolls now, revoking all pardons. The words landed like a gut punch. Exile, not death, but erasure. A leader, that could mean colony governors, fleet admirals, or worse, voices like Ilias's in the scientific councils. Mara's mind spun. Her own name hovered on that roster as delegation captain, but the cost would ripple, leaving humanity leaderless in the crisis. Before she could respond, a side panel irised open, and Corvash's envoy glided in, a sleek drone orb trailing a data filament. It hovered before Mara, extending a crystalline template stamped with the council medallion, its edges glowing with official seals. The document unfurled in holographic script, fields for name, rank, destination coordinates, all blank save the header, voluntary exile accord, and the timestamp, dawn deadline 0647 station cycle. Non-compliance triggers bell activation. Sarah's hand brushed her holster again, but Mara stilled her with a look. The envoy's orb pulsed once, then retreated, leaving the template suspended in the air like a guillotine's blade. Corvash's eyes gleamed. The clock ticks, Captain. Choose wisely, or let it choose for you. Mara's gaze locked onto the holographic template, hovering in the chamber's dim light, its edges flickering like a promise of severance. The air hummed with the low thrum of council tech, a constant reminder of the invisible chains binding them all. Sarah's fingers twitched near her holster, but Mara shot her a sharp glance. Hold, not now. The young lieutenant's jaw tightened, her eyes fierce with that impulsive fire Mara both admired and feared. Across the vast audience hall, The gathered envoys from a dozen species leaned forward, their alien forms a mosaic of scales, feathers, and bioluminescent glows, all waiting for humanity's next misstep. Corvash's voice cut through the tension, smooth as polished obsidian. "The demand stands, Captain Eden. One of your delegation must volunteer for exile to the Outer Rings, their neural codes registered to ensure compliance. Refusal invites broader sanctions. Sarah Koh's immediate rendition for her enforcer passed, and Kira Ren's transfer to a secure facility for evaluation." His multifaceted eyes reflected the template's glow, impartiality etched into every ridge of his exoskeletal face. But Mara saw the calculation beneath, the way he savored the ritual of control. She felt the weight of it all pressing down, the fragile thread of humanity's pardon, woven from blood and bargains after the wars that had scarred their colonies. Her duty had always been clear: protect the settlements, keep the civilians breathing free air. But this? Volunteering meant stepping into the void, codes stripped and handed over like a surrender. Sarah would fight it, Elias would argue ethics, but hesitation now would doom them all. Mara's mind raced through contingencies, the hidden override she'd buried in her implant, a desperate upload to the ledger during exile, a chance to expose the Council's game. It was a gambit, rigid and unyielding, just like her. No room for half measures. Rising from her seat, Mara straightened her uniform, the fabric stiff against her skin from too many sleepless cycles. The chamber fell silent as she stepped forward, her boots echoing on the polished floor. "I volunteer," she said, voice steady, carrying to every corner of the hall. Gasps rippled from the envoys, some in surprise, others in grim satisfaction. Sarah half rose, her face paling, but Mara didn't look back. "Captain Mara Eden for exile. Register my codes. Let Sarah and Kira walk free." Corvash's mandibles clicked softly, a sound like dry leaves underfoot. "A noble choice, Captain. The Council accepts." He gestured and the template shimmered, expanding into a full ceremonial interface. Drones descended from the ceiling, their fields humming as they interfaced with her neural port at the base of her skull. Pain lanced through her, a cold burn as her recall codes were extracted, mapped, and etched into the Council's immutable ledger. It felt like roots being torn from soil, her access to human networks flickering out one by one. Ship logs, colony comms, even the secure channels back home, sealed. She clenched her jaw, tasting blood from where she'd bitten her lip. For them. For the worlds that couldn't afford another war. The ceremony dragged on, a public spectacle under the vaulted dome where holographic stars wheeled overhead, mocking their isolation. Corvash intoned the rites in the neutral trade tongue, his words binding her to the Outer Rings, a limbo of asteroid outposts where exiles rotted under surveillance. Envoys murmured approvals. This was order restored, humanity's leash tightened. As the drones withdrew, Mara felt the final lock click into place. Her implant went dark, save for the override's dormant pulse, hidden deep in encrypted layers. Sarah's eyes met hers across the hall, gratitude warring with fury. Ilias stood rigid beside her, his face a mask of quiet horror, hands clenched as if holding back a flood. But as the chamber doors hissed open for her departure, a comm pinged in Mara's earpiece, private from an unknown source. She almost ignored it, but curiosity won. The message was terse. Contingency exposed. Jaro. Her blood ran cold. Jaro, the minor aide from their own delegation, a quiet logistics handler she'd trusted with peripheral data flows. Betrayal, sharp and personal. He'd leaked the override plan, probably for some promise of leniency or a cut of council favor. The timing was no coincidence. It hit just as her codes were registering, Alarms blared before she could process it fully. Security fields snapped into place around the delegation section, isolating Sarah and Ilias. Council guards, sleek armored forms with energy lances, swarmed in, their movements precise, unyielding. Sarah drew her sidearm in a blur, but the fields hummed, draining her weapon's charge. "Stand down!" Mara barked, lunging toward the barrier, but it held firm, invisible walls boxing her out. "Corvash, this wasn't the deal." The High Arbiter turned, his expression unchanging. "New intelligence demands adjustment, Captain. Your protégé's detention is precautionary, pending review of this contingency you hid." Sarah struggled against the guards, her impulsive snarl echoing as they cuffed her with neural restraints, her body going rigid. "Mara!" she shouted, voice cracking with that raw protectiveness that always got her in deeper. Kira, Ilyas's sister, was already being pulled from the sidelines, her frail form, still recovering from the transit sickness, dragged toward a side exit. "No, please," Ilyas stammered, stepping forward, but a guard shoved him back. Mara's fists balled at her sides, the exile shuttle waiting beyond the doors like an open maw. Yaro's leak had unraveled everything. Sarah's past as a system enforcer made her an easy target, Kira's vulnerability a lever against Ilias. The Council's game laid bare in an instant. She wanted to scream, to charge the fields and fight, but that was Sarah's impulse, not hers. Duty demanded calculation. "Release them," she said through gritted teeth, meeting Corvash's gaze. "My exile buys their safety. Honor it." "Protocols evolve," Corvash replied, almost gently. Sarah Coe to holding cells, Kira Wren to the detention ring, for her protection, of course. The doors to the shuttle bay irised open, and escorts nudged Mara forward. She glanced back one last time, Sarah's defiant glare, Ilyas's crumbling resolve as he reached futilely for his sister. The betrayal burned, a war-scarred ache in her chest. Humanity's pardon was fraying, and she'd just handed them the shears. The shuttle ride to the outer rings was a blur of sterile corridors and enforced silence. Mara sat strapped in, the vessel's hum vibrating through her bones as it pierced the station's hull. Her implant's darkness was absolute now, no feeds, no maps, just the override's faint heartbeat, waiting. Exile meant isolation, but also opportunity. The ring's laxer security could let her slip the upload. If Jaro hadn't poisoned it all. Doubt gnawed at her. Had he leaked more? Was the Council already tracing the code? Meanwhile, light years away in the Council's underbelly, Ilias moved like a shadow. The data vault's access panel yielded to his spliced keycard, a tool he'd jury-rigged from scavenged envoy tech during the ceremony's chaos. Sweat beaded on his brow, the air thick with coolant and ozone. His sister's transfer gnawed at him. Kira, pale and breakable, shipped to some ring of despair. It fueled him, overriding his naive faith in institutions. The vault door hissed open, revealing racks of glowing cores, the forgiveness ledger's heart. He plugged in his portable rig, fingers flying over the interface. Data streams flooded his visor. Atonement metrics, human probation logs, ritual transcripts. But as he delved deeper, patterns emerged. Not redemption, but control. The ledger wasn't a moral archive. It was a web of engineered dependencies. Pardon terms laced with backdoors. Species forgiveness tied to resource tributes and veto powers. Humanity's wars, amplified in the records to justify wardship, civilian deaths tallied not for justice, but to leverage compliance. Ilyas's stomach twisted, his life's work, proving value through evidence, built on lies. The Council's impartiality was a facade, Corvash's rituals a tool to erode autonomy, one atonement at a time. A proximity alert pinged, guards inbound. He yanked the drive, heart pounding, and slipped into the vents. the metal cold against his palms, betrayal stacked on betrayal. If Mara's contingency was out, this data could be their counter. But Kira, the cost was mounting, his vulnerability cracking his resolve. He had to reach Sarah, get word to Mara. Evidence-driven redemption, it was a fool's gospel now. In the exile outpost, a drab cluster of habmods orbiting a barren rock, Mara paced her assigned cell, the viewport showing endless void. The guards had been perfunctory, their scans superficial. Good. Jaro's leak might have trapped Sarah and Kira, but it hadn't reached here yet. Her rigid duty surged. Negotiation had failed. Gambits remained. She activated the override sequence, neural commands threading through the implant's shadows. It would upload to the ledger's fringe nodes during a routine sync, exposing the seals on human networks. Risky, council countermeasures could fry her implant, or, worse, trigger reprisals on the prisoners. Sarah's detention, Kira's ring transfer. Their faces haunted her. But backing down meant permanent wardship. Humanity's dignity bartered away. The upload began, a subtle warmth building in her skull as data packets slipped free. She held her breath, monitoring the flow, 10%, 20%. Then the outpost's lights flickered. Her comm implant, supposedly dead, crackled to life with an incoming alert, harsh and unfiltered. Unauthorized ledger access, containment protocol imminent. Mara's fingers tightened on the console edge as the upload surged past 50%. The warmth in her implant spiking like a fever breaking. The outpost's hum deepened, then stuttered, lights dimming to a predatory red. That alert blared again in her skull. Containment protocol imminent. Ledger integrity compromised, all channels opening. She cursed under her breath, yanking the neural link free with a wet pop that echoed in the sterile chamber. The override she'd slipped in, a ghost code from old human black ops, meant to tweak just the probation clause, had teeth. It wasn't supposed to rip the veil, but as the data flooded out, she saw it unfolding on the outpost's cracked hollow screen. The forgiveness ledger, that towering digital monument to Council's mercy, fracturing live across every broadcast node from the core worlds to the fringe human sectors. Public clause first. Her tweak was surgical. Expose the conditional pardon as the farce it was. Force the Council to acknowledge humanity's autonomy wasn't a gift, but a right earned in blood. But the code cascaded. Subroutines she'd overlooked, buried under layers of alien encryption, triggered a dump. Records spilled. Decades of manipulations, from falsified atrocity logs during the Uplift Wars to engineered famines on colony outposts, all pinned on human instability to justify the wardship. Holofeeds lit up with grainy archives, council envoys bribing warlords, staging provocations, then ringing the expiration bell in ritual piety while human worlds starved. Mara's stomach knotted. This wasn't her plan. Her gambit was clean, a polite knife to the throat of bureaucracy. Now it was a brawl in the streets, and the crowd was watching. Sarah's voice cut through her comm, sharp and edged with static. Captain, sectors reporting, ledgers broadcasting raw. They're seeing it all, the lies, the setups. Civilians are cheering in the domes. Keep them contained, Mara snapped, already moving toward the airlock. Her mind raced through contingencies. The Council's response would be swift, austere. Corvash wouldn't let this slide. She sealed her suit, the hiss of atmosphere a grim underscore, and launched into the void toward the delegation shuttle. The stars blurred as thrusters fired, but her implant pinged relentless. Outrage flooding Council channels, demands for her head. High above the human sprawl, in the shadowed spires of the Arbiter's citadel, Corvash's voice boomed across the ether, cold, unyielding like alloy striking stone. Mara caught it mid-transit, the broadcast hijacking her shuttle's nav. Humanity's probation is revoked. The ledger's sanctity breached demands restitution. Orbital interdiction commences. Surgical strikes authorized on non-compliant stations. Evacuate or perish. The words landed like a gut punch. Mara slammed the console, pulling up feeds. Human stations, Eden Prime, the agri-domes where Kira worked, the tactical hubs Sarah guarded, lit red on the grid. Council dreadnoughts, sleek predators from the Vexari fleets, dropped from Lagrange points, their railguns charging with that telltale azure glow. Strikes targeted civilian zones, hydroponic bays, family quarters, the very hearts pumping life into the colonies. Kira's lab, buried in the underlevels of Station Theta, blinked vulnerable. Sarah's position at the perimeter watchtower, exposed. "No," Mara whispered, her voice raw in the cockpit's confines. She keyed the delegation line. "Ilias, talk to me. What's happening on your end?" Static, then his voice, strained but steady. "Strikes inbound, Mara. They're aiming for the power cores. Civilians trapped. I can reroute." She pictured him in the engineering bay, that lanky frame hunched over panels, his sister's face haunting every calculation. Ilias had always believed in the data, improving humanity's worth through cold metrics. But this was fire. "Do it," she said, "whatever it takes." On Station Theta, Ilias's hands flew across the grid, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. Alarms wailed as the first Vexari salvo skimmed the hull, vaporizing a sensor array in a bloom of plasma. He bypassed the main relays, fingers dancing through override sequences that would flag every ethical subroutine in the system. Power surged from military buffers, shields meant for warships, into civilian envelopes. Dome fields flickered to life, translucent barriers snapping up around hab blocks, Kira's sector chief among them. But the cost hit immediate. His credentials flashed revoked on the console. Unauthorized diversion. Loyalty breach detected. Political backers, those quiet allies in the human Senate who'd greased his path, severed ties in a cascade of disavowals. Messages poured in. "You're burning us all, Ren. No more favors." His career, that fragile scaffold of reputation, crumbled. Worse, the reroute starved the defense arrays. Station guns went dark just as the next strike wave crested. Kira's voice broke through his private channel, frantic from the lab. "Ilias, the shields, did you—" "Stay down," he cut her off, voice cracking. "It's holding, for now." He slumped against the bulkhead, the weight of it pressing in. Naive, they'd called him, trusting the Council's institutions to value evidence over empire. Now he'd chosen family over facade, and the void answered with silence. Mara's shuttle docked amid chaos, the bay shuddering from near misses. Sarah met her at the hatch, rifle slung, eyes fierce under the helmet's glow. "Captain, Jarro's gone rogue, says he's making it right." Jarro, the defector from the inner council staff, the one who'd leaked the ledger's back doors to them weeks ago. Mara had kept him at arm's length. Trust was a luxury in this game, but his intel had been gold. Now feeds showed him planetside, breaching a council relay tower on the fringe moon. Grainy drone footage, the man scrambling up scaffoldings, planting charges with desperate precision. "For the humans," he muttered into a hacked broadcast, voice trembling. "I was blind. This ends the lies." Corvash's response was theater, broadcast wide for the galaxy's edification. The High Arbiter's hologram materialized in every feed, his elongated features stern, robes pooling like spilled ink. "Traitor Jarro seeks to sabotage the relays, to deepen the breach. Such perfidy demands justice." Drones swarmed the tower, energy lances pierced the night. Jarro's scream cut short as the charges detonated prematurely, the tower crumpling in a fireball that lit the lunar craters. The execution was public, visceral, his body strung in hollow replay, branded with the Council's seal of treason. Trust shattered like glass. Human channels erupted in fury, old wounds reopening, whispers of more defectors, accusations flying. Mara's calm flooded with demands from the colonies. Strike back now, before the dreadnoughts glassed them all. She pushed into the command deck, Sarah at her flank, Ilias patching in from Theta. The air hummed with tension, officers barking coordinates for a counterstrike. Human corvettes, relics from the uplift era, powered up in the outer docks, armed with fusion lances that could punch through Vexari armor, but at the cost of everything nearby. The plan was lethal. Overload the dreadnought's engines mid-burn, chain reaction the fleet. Civilian shields be damned. It'd take the stations with them. Mara's hand hovered over the execute key, heart pounding a war drum. Sarah watched her, silent, that impulsive fire in her eyes begging for the fight. Ilias's feed showed his face pale, Kira's safety hanging by his hack. This was duty, rigid, decisive. Push back or lose everything. But the ledger's dump replayed in her mind. Manipulations, not monsters. Humanity wasn't the savages they painted. Striking blind would prove it. "Stop," she said, voice cutting the din like a blade. Fingers slammed the abort. Alarms blared in protest. But the corvettes powered down, lances cooling, gasps rippled through the deck. "No counterstrike, we negotiate, hostage exchange, our defectors for their fleet pullback. Sarah, you're with me on the line to Corvash. Ilias, hold those shields." Sarah's jaw tightened, her flaw flaring, that protective surge wanting to charge, not parley, but she nodded, gripping her console. "Your call, Captain, but if they push—" "They won't," Mara lied, steadying her breath. She opened the secure channel to the Citadel, the line crackling with interference. Corvash's image resolved, austere and unmoved. The chamber behind him a vault of glowing ledgers. "Captain Eden," he intoned, voice a ritual dirge. "Your provocations end in atonement. The exchange you propose is noted, but mercy expires." His hand, long clawed, descended on a pedestal. The expiration bell tolled, a sonic wave that rippled through every comm, every neural implant, from the Council's core to humanity's ragged edges. Hollow timers ignited across sectors, 90 cycles, final countdown, revocation in full, wardship eternal, autonomy erased. Mara met his gaze, calm washing over the fear, polite danger coiling in her core. "Then let's make it count, Arbiter. Humanity's not done talking." The toll echoed in her bones as the shuttle's alarms joined the chorus. Dreadnought shadows lengthening over the stations. Kira's sector shield flickered under strain. Sarah's watchtower braced for boarding. Ilias's voice came faint. "Holding, but not forever." Jarro's pyre smoldered on the feeds, a warning and a spark. The galaxy watched, and Mara felt the weight of it all, duty's rigid edge, the moral tangle of choices that could save or doom them. No clean wins here, just the push, the cost, the fragile hope of reclaiming what was stolen. The timer ticked, 89. The chamber's air hummed with the low thrum of the expiration bell, its holographic projection pulsing like a wound in the center of the vast council hall. Mara Eden stood at the ritual dais, her hands steady as she interfaced the neural link. The timer floated above, 88. Each tick echoed in her skull, a mechanical heartbeat counting down humanity's fragile reprieve. She glanced at the assembled arbiters, their elongated forms draped in robes of iridescent alloy, faces masked in ceremonial neutrality. High Arbiter Corvash loomed at the head, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the light in cold prisms. "Captain Eden," he intoned, voice smooth as polished stone. "The surrender of command codes is irrevocable. You trade your authority for the corridors. Confirm." Mara's jaw tightened, but her response came even, polite, the human way, calm under the blade. "I confirm. Evacuation routes for the settlements. Open them now." Her fingers danced over the interface, uploading the codes that governed every human vessel, every orbital defense grid. It was a gutting, this yielding. Her role as delegation captain, her leverage in these stars, all funneled into a stream of data, now binding her to their chains. Freedom for the civilians, millions in the outer habitats, families she'd sworn to shield, meant her own collar. The upload completed with a chime, and the bell's timer dipped to 87. Mara felt the weight settle, invisible restraints sinking to her implants. No more overrides, no more pulling strings from the shadows. She was theirs now, a ward in their game. But the corridors would light up across the void, safe passages snaking through contested space. Ships could flee the encroaching blockades, carrying the young, the wounded, the ones who hadn't signed up for this war of words and wills. From the antechamber's viewport, she caught a flicker, shuttles detaching from the habitat rings, engines flaring blue against the black. It was working. Her sacrifice bought time, breath for those lungs. Yet the flaw in her gnawed. This rigid duty, always the gambit over talk, had led here. She'd pushed for the appeal, betting humanity's ethics against their legal noose, and now she paid with her autonomy. 86. In the adjacent data vault, separated by a translucent force wall, Dr. Elias Wren worked in tandem, his face pale under the glow of cascading screens. Mara watched him through the barrier, their eyes meeting briefly, a nod, the only signal needed. Elias's hands flew, releasing the full forgiveness ledger archive into the interstellar net. Not the sanitized version the Council peddled, but the raw truth. Every human atonement logged, every manipulation buried in fine print. Evidence of rigged audits, coerced testimonies from allied systems, the Council's quiet siphoning of human resources under the guise of rehabilitation. "Transmitting to the Viridian Alliance," Ilias murmured, voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. "And the Orion Compact. Let them see the strings." His motive burned clear. Proof over pleas. Data as the architect of redemption. But his flaw shadowed him. That naive faith in institutions, the vulnerability tied to his sister Kira, still held in the detention ring below. If this backfired, they'd use her against him, twist his career into rubble. The releases hit the networks like shockwaves. Mara saw the ripple on her own display, diplomatic channels lighting up, allied envoys pulling support from Corvash's bloc, withdrawals cascaded, trade pacts dissolving, patrol fleets redirecting, pockets of human habitat, isolated outposts on fringe worlds, suddenly breathed free. Blockades faltered as alien captains questioned orders, their comms buzzing with doubt. Ilias had cracked the facade, saving fragments of humanity's scattered empire. But victory tasted like ash. The bell tolled 85. Corvash's response came swift, his form rising from the arbiter throne with deliberate grace. "The Council acknowledges the data breach," he declared, projecting to the hall and beyond, his words broadcasting across linked systems. However, such acts of defiance confirm humanity's unreadiness. Effective immediately under Article 47 of the Interstellar Compact, your species' political rights are revoked. No representation, no autonomous governance. Wardship is permanent. The hall stirred, arbiters murmuring in their clicking tongues, but none challenged. Mara's blood ran cold. The legal win, the exposed ledger, meant nothing now. They'd twisted it into chains, converting her surrender and Ilias's truth into a deeper loss. Humanity's voice silenced. Their colonies reduced to protected zones under Council oversight. Moral high ground traded for survival. But at what cost? Her ethics, the very dignity she'd fought for, now a relic. She met Corvash's gaze, her voice cutting through the din, polite but edged. You've stripped us bare, Arbiter, but the truth's out. How long before your allies question your impartiality? His eyes narrowed, a flicker of something. Fear. Loss of control, the contagion of precedent humanity represented. The compact endures, Captain. Your forgiveness expired. Ours does not yield. 84. Chaos erupted in the lower decks, the hall's alarms wailing as the detention ring's feeds hacked into the main projection. Mara spun toward the screens, heart slamming. Sarah Coe, her protégé, the tactical shadow with impulsive fire, burst into view, moving like a storm through the ring's sterile corridors. Freed in the uproar of the data release, Sarah had slipped her bonds. Her enforcer passed, fueling the breach. The warden, a hulking Krell guard with armored plating, blocked the cell block. Intruder, protocol demands. His words choked off as Sarah's blade, contraband vibro knife from her hidden kit, slashed across his throat. Blood sprayed, thick and iridescent, painting the walls. Kira Wren stumbled out, Ilias's sister, her face gaunt from weeks of isolation, eyes wide with shock. Sarah, what? Kira gasped, but Sarah hauled her forward, firing suppressive rounds from a scavenged pulse pistol to cover their escape. Mara's breath caught. Through the hacked feed, she saw it all. Sarah's face, twisted not in triumph, but fracture. The kill wasn't clean strategy. It was raw, protective fury overriding protocol. Sarah, who'd clawed from system enforcer to Mara's trusted operative, motivated by proving herself beyond that bloody history. But this? Killing the warden shattered her code, the impulsive instinct to shield family, surrogate or not. Now a stain. Mara cared for her like a daughter, couldn't lose this political agency, but watching Sarah's hands shake as she dragged Kira to safety, it forced the truth home. Institutional forgiveness was no grace. It was a leash, expiring to control. Mara had clung to the Council's rituals, her rigid duty blinding her to the mechanism. No more. The cost piled. Sarah's soul cracked. Kira saved but scarred. Ilias's faith tested as his sister emerged bloodied. 83. The hall devolved into shouts, security drones swarming the lower levels. Mara seized the moment, her implants still linked despite the surrender, hijacking a comm array, stripped of command. But the ledger's exposure had jammed the overrides, leaving slivers of access. She patched into the open channels, her voice broadcasting to human colonies, allied nets, the void itself. This is Mara Eden, former captain of the delegation. Her words steady, war-scarred calm, masking the storm inside. The Council has revoked our rights, turned pardon to wardship. We've surrendered codes, exposed their lies, bled for corridors and truths. But redemption? It doesn't kneel to their bell. She paused, the timer mocking at 82. Sarah and Kira's feed cut out, evacuating perhaps into the chaos. But the spark ignited. Reports flooded in. Uprisings on Epsilon Drift, workers seizing habitat controls, protests on New Terra, crowds chanting against the compact. Colonies long compliant under probation now roared. Her signal, raw and questioning, fueled the fire. Question with me, Mara continued, voice gaining steel. If forgiveness has an expiration, who has the right to grant a new beginning? The transmission pulsed out, unanswered, the future a jagged edge. The bell tolled on, but humanity's silence broke. Mara stood amid the Arbiter's fury, free in fracture, the cost etched in every choice. Authority lost, morals bent, but agency reclaimed in the asking. Corvash's glare burned, his authority fraying, yet the stars stirred with human resolve, competent, complex, dangerous in their polite defiance.